Purpose Highway is a space for discussions that drive connections toward people's highest purpose to build a better self and a better world. Join me for Season 1, where I start to uncover stories of entrepreneurs and thinkers that are making an impact. I'm your host, Scott Mason, and enjoy today's episode. When you're racing down the Purpose Highway, we want to make sure you're healthy and happy every step of the way. That's why we're proud to partner with It's NOLA, 21st century plant-based healthy granola snack bites made with real ingredients and audacious flavor. It's NOLA crafts small batch hand-rolled granola balls that are vegan, gluten-free, and naturally low in sugar. Locally made in Brooklyn, It's NOLA's delightful bites come in 3 flavors: luscious cranberry coconut, sassy mango masala, and dark, decadent, chewy chocolate. It's NOLA is available to both individual customers and for wholesale accounts at itsnola.com. That's ITSNOLA.com. Guests on this show are already enjoying this delicious snack. Check out It's NOLA's website for yourself and find out how good it is. Hello, everybody. It's Scott Mason, revving up for another race down the Purpose Highway. And with me in the front seat today is Shelley Brown. Shelley is a speaker and a storyteller. She is a freelance writer and a columnist. She is the author of an upcoming New York Times bestseller. She's a mindfulness educator, and she is the leader of an emerging movement that speaks to me so deeply, I had to have her on the show. Shelley, welcome to Scott Mason's Purpose Highway podcast.
This is amazing. I can't even believe that we get to do this together. I mean, seriously.
What's even better is that the audience is going to get to eavesdrop on us and laugh and have a grand old time and leave with some thoughts in their head too, which is very exciting.
That's incredible.
Let's just roll up our sleeves. Well, I'm the only one wearing sleeves today. Why don't we just roll up the sleeves? Exactly. And tell us about the first time in your life someone called you weird.
Oh, God, Scott. Isn't it funny? Our weird doesn't know it's weird until somebody judges it. And my story, if anybody's old enough, and I'm going to age myself even though I look really young, is like an after-school special. Do you remember? There was always like some major conflict and some major trauma, and then there'd be a resolution. Well, I'll tell you about the trauma before I tell you about anything else. When I was in 6th grade, I was this creative, artsy girl who played piano and guitar and loved to sing. And I was really curious about femininity. I had like this feminist mom, and everybody else's mom was like a Mrs. Brady kind of a mom, but my mom was a feminist. And I was fascinated by women and womanhood and glamorous women on TV and things like that. And I had this little journal, and I drew pictures of my classmates with an arrow pointing to their chest, indicating whether they had started developing breasts, and an arrow pointing to their private parts to indicate whether they had begun menstruating. And of course, the journal got discovered. And I mean, epic bullying ensued. I mean, traumatizing. And it was the first time that I thought, I want to die. I'm going to kill myself. And I'm going to take 4 aspirin because the bottle says to take 2. And I thought if I took 4, I could die. It was that traumatic. And it was, you are weird. Ew, Shelley, you are weird. Shelley, you are so weird. And I'll say one more thing. When we get told we're weird, it's like we put this sweater on that's the scratchiest, itchiest combo wool synthetic that in 100-degree heat that you feel like you can't take off. And so it was like, I am weird.
It's like you would be stuck in the 1970s forever if someone calls you weird, which there's a criminal injustice there.
Well, not musically, but that's another conversation. For another
That's right. And I do think that addendum is very important to say.
It is.
Yeah. How did you end up coping with that? So you felt horrible. What, did you just carry that around for all your school life, or did you find a circle of people to support you, or did you talk to your mom and dad about it? What happened exactly?
I wish it were something that was that concrete. I actually wore that sweater for decades. And because at that moment, besides that moment, the preceding moments, family dynamics and things, it was the solidification that I was somehow unworthy, unlovable, and something was like really wrong with who I was. So for decades, I looked at the world like it was my identity clothing store, and I looked to anything that I could cover up that weird sweater with. So it brought me down a whole bunch of trajectories that were not who I was. In fact, some of them were downright destructive.
Let's imagine that the weird girl today is capable of both time travel and astral projection. So you take your astral spirit back in time and you fill up the spirit of the weird girl back then. What would be different?
That weird girl would be who I am now in the childhood version, because I've reconnected with the essence of who she is. And that weird little girl was somebody who was the most spirited, creative person who lived in the space of love and possibility until she didn't.
Talk to me and share the story of how that girl became the one that you are now.
How that girl became the one that I am now? Well, again, those decades of wearing different identities were fraught with a lot of unease, disease, misdiagnosis of depression and anxiety and all kinds of stuff. I was in the corporate world in roles that were trying to kind of cover up who I really was, trying to appear like a badass, running a zillion marathons and ultra marathons to make this body worthy because the insides were not worthy, to make sure that I was such a perfectionist and a great performer at work. And when I was celebrated well by a mentor, I actually did okay. But in the world as we know, the corporate world, they don't celebrate the divergent thinkers so much. They don't celebrate the creatives so much. And I didn't celebrate it. So I didn't really stand in alignment with who I was. And ultimately, it was like Humpty Dumpty fell off the brick wall and I cracked.
When you were living that life, talk to us in a little bit more detail, first of all, about what exactly you did do in large organizational life so we can get a little bit deeper of a context. And then I have a few more questions after that.
Sure. And I am happy to dive into any area with you, Scott. And actually, I don't have shame about anything I've ever done. And if it can serve to help other people feel less alone, then I am so down with talking about it. I started out in the hotel industry. I was concierge for many years, which was a really cool role when you really like people and you're interested in helping people. It was really cool. And so I started out as a concierge. I was at Four Seasons hotels. I was with Fairmont hotels. I was with some pretty puff properties. And then at the young age of 25 or 26, I'm like, I don't want to work every weekend. And I went into the meeting planning side of things, and then in sales, and then in technology sales and early startups. And then spent the next bunch of my career in technology sales roles in various capacities.
When you said that the weird girl basically was being suppressed during this time period, talk to us a little bit about who and what you were on the outside, what you were presenting to the world versus who and what you were inside.
Well, I was presenting myself like I was a badass.
What does that mean?
Well, it was trying to cover up the parts of myself that I just didn't feel were worthy of presenting to the world by trying to be thin enough and pretty enough and attractive enough and fit enough and run enough races and have enough medals and making my identity what I did. I'm a runner. I'm a spin instructor. I am so-and-so's girlfriend. I am, making things outside of myself my identity.
The concept of identity, particularly as you're discussing it, is fascinating to me because in your case, I'm almost hearing, and I would love to be corrected if I'm wrong, by the way, that there was an identity that was being constructed that was separate, and it sounds like increasingly separate from what one might consider a natural identity. Is that a fair statement?
It's a fair statement. And I think what happens is, and I don't know if I said this, but it's like you treat the world like it's your identity clothing store and you run around everywhere except for your own self to find something that you think is going to make you you.
Was it a conscious decision of yours to live that way, or was it just something that happened?
It happened not consciously. It was reactively because whatever I was not okay. So I had to react by trying to find stuff outside of myself to attach myself to.
You said earlier that there were periods in your life in which there were misdiagnoses, or there were people that were looking at you and saying, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is the problem, these are the proposed solutions, I assume. Talk to me a little bit about when that exactly was happening and to what extent that played into all of this.
So I think when we are living our life misaligned with who we are, when we're out of alignment, it can cause fear and it could cause stress and it can cause uncertainty. And for me, it manifested with a severe eating disorder for a couple of decades. And then that kind of translated into some anxiety and some depression. And I would go to therapists and get put on a, myriad of antidepressants and anti-anxieties. And ultimately what happened was in about 2012, actually, I don't remember, 2012, 13 or something, my vertebrae collapsed and crushed the nerves going down my leg. And I had at that point run probably 26 marathons, 6 ultras, and 50 halves. And that was my identity. That was who I was. I was an athlete. I was a runner, and my life basket got dumped upside down. I had met a guy, I had become like completely codependent with him, and he became a drug addict in front of my eyes. I lost my job, and I lost my ability to walk, lost my ability to sleep, and I was terrified.
Okay. There's a lot to unpack there. So I'm going to step back a little bit. That's true. So let me step back a little bit, and we'll take the gift that you've given us and gradually peel off the wrapping papers, and go through the boxes. First of all, your injury. How exactly does that happen? Like, did you literally just wake up one day and your vertebrae collapse? What does that even look like? I don't understand. It's beyond my capacity to imagine.
Well, most runners are taught to run through pain, and I had herniated the disc somehow. I don't know how, I don't know when, and I kept running distance, and the compression from the running, finally the disc there was no more disc left. And so the vertebrae just collapsed. The vertebrae just collapsed and was compressing the nerve. And so they don't like to do back surgery right away. They try to exhaust the conservative methods. And so I was pretty much kept in this chronic pain for a year. And I wasn't a narcotic person. I don't like codeine. And so I just literally went from this kind of spark plug to being like the most terrified, unhappy, sad person.
And you were in a relationship at the time, I'm gathering.
Yeah.
And that fell apart around this time. Am I understanding correct? And how did that lead to this? I mean, was he supportive at all, or was he like, okay, bad vertebrae, bye? Or like, what exactly was going through his mind? What happened with the relationship that caused that?
Both of us were losing who we thought we were at the same time. He had been married in a long-term marriage with kids. And I think the guilt of, and I was not a homewrecker, by the way, but I think that the guilt of leaving that long-term marriage to be himself or to have whatever freedom he wanted caused him to completely I think he was doing drugs, and then it just escalated, and then he just succumbed to this horrible addiction. And at the same time, I was save me, rescue me, knight in shining armor. This guy is amazing, and I'm a badass runner, and we're gonna get together, and our life is gonna be the fairy tale that I played Barbies, like when I played Barbies, and we both became undone at the same time. And so even though he tried to support me, his primary relationship was drugs.
In the middle of all of this, your job.
I got fired.
It's interesting that you use those words, Shelley, because uttering them is actually, for many people, especially those that have invested a lot of their identity in their career, can be the three "I was fired" can be the three hardest words to utter. We see it all the time. I'm spending time with my family. I decided to go on a retirement that conveniently ends 3 months later the minute I get another job. What happened?
I was fired more than once, by the way. I was fired twice. What happened was, in my stress, I was looking for something else to make me okay. And I thought another job would be the thing that would make me okay. So I started reaching out on email, and I accidentally copied my email into my Salesforce database that made it look like I was reaching out to one of our clients for a job. And it was not the person in the record, in the Salesforce record. It was somebody completely not in the record. And so when they were looking at the call reports and the reports in Salesforce database, they saw a copy of an email that was looking for job opportunities.
Sometimes these things, sometimes these things are accidents. Sometimes I look back and I'm like, that wasn't an accident.
Right. But I mean, it kind of was, because I was literally 2 weeks before I was having another surgery, and my insurance had to go to Cobra, and I was having my thyroid. I had a cancer scare with my thyroid, and I had to get my thyroid removed. At the same time, my back stuff was going on. But honestly, I didn't understand what happened. And when I got fired, they were like, well, we know you're looking for other jobs. And I couldn't for the life of me understand how they would think I was looking for another job, because they didn't tell me that they had seen the Salesforce record.
Yeah. When you were living that life, and before you lost the job at the same time you were going through the issues with your back and your husband, were you consciously saying, not only do I want to appear badass, I want to appear normal? Or was normalcy even part of your equation? Were you like, no, normal isn't good enough for me. I've got to be extraordinary so long as I'm not weird?
Exactly. I wanted to be extraordinary. And the more I tried to hold it together, the more the stress became rampant.
You lost it all put us in your shoes. What was it like being Shelley Brown during those days?
I could not sleep at all. I was terrified. It would shake all day. I was in chronic pain. I was sometimes not able to leave the house or get in the car to go to a PT appointment because I hadn't been able to sleep. I couldn't even get to the therapist. I was in this codependent relationship with a drug addict, and I was trying to make him appear healthy and better, and trying to make him see that what he was doing was so crazy, but I didn't even realize my addiction to him, and that I really needed him to show up a certain way for me. And I wasn't even showing up for me the way I needed to. And so it was a mess, and I wanted to leave, and I was scared to leave. And it took me a while till I could leave.
How did your life begin to change?
My life began to change when I started getting my physical health back. And I actually went to an Al-Anon program and got some support from people. But it was really when I made the decision that I wanted to move. I was in North Carolina because that's where I went to run all year long. When I made the decision to move back to Chicago, as soon as I got back to Chicago after 3 years of being gone, it was like the 3 years prior had never happened.
What do you mean by that?
It was like I was home again. And I felt safe at home. I felt safe away from this person. I felt like walking in familiar areas and neighborhoods was just like a salve on my heart, to be back where I was from.
Shelley, how long ago was this?
This was in 2014.
So within a period of 6 years, you became the person that we are watching or listening to right now. Talk to us about that evolution, because a lot of people are going to hear the story and they may be living it themselves, and they may want to say to themselves, how did she get like that? I'm stuck. I can't see out of it.
Yeah, well, thank you. So it is a process. It didn't happen. It's not magic at all. In fact, when I came back to Chicago, something opened up creatively for me. I'd always been a creator as a little kid, and it was kind of shut down, and I started doing photography and all this stuff. But I needed a way to support myself. And so I went running back to the corporate jobs that I had known, trying to make them look like they had before. And for some reason, my stress response had been kicked up with the injury, and being back into the corporate world that was not in alignment with who I was triggering so much stress, to the point where I just kind of job hopped for the next few years.
Wow.
And ultimately, I got what I thought was my dream job. I was selling software for one of the largest companies in the industry, and I choked. The anxiety just made me choke. I was so anxious. I felt like a KPI. I felt like data. I felt like I probably wasn't in the right job, but I also was in fear. So the two kind of collided. And then I got put on probation, but I ended up leaving that job. I got another job, and my stress response was in full throttle, to the point where one day I took off my headset in front of 25 people and I said, F this place, I'm effing out of here. And it was an outer body experience that I literally stopped and sobbed and did not know what had happened. But it was literally what I would call a nervous breakdown.
I've got to ask, how did the people in the room react?
I was so what just happened? And am I going to get in trouble? And I couldn't, it was an outer body experience. I got sent to went to HR. My boss was out of town. She came back. She kept quiet for a couple of days, and then they put me on probation, which only stirred up my stress response
of course,
even more. And then in my fear, I made another error and I got fired. And I immediately enrolled in a mindfulness-based stress reduction program, which was a life changer.
What is that exactly?
So what happens is with the stress response, you can't think yourself out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't think to yourself, why can't I be calm? Why can't I be calm? And it's because your amygdala is hijacked and everything is going into your threat response area. It's not going through the CEO of your brain, which is the prefrontal cortex. So everything is coming in like it's a threat to you. And you're like bracing for the threat. And it isn't just your head. It's a physiological response. And so the Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Program is an 8-week program. And if you're suffering from severe stress and anxiety, I highly recommend this program. And there's many online programs. In fact, my guy in Chicago Insight Center, is starting another one in May. If you want to connect with me, I'll connect you. But it's an 8-week program, and it's a mindfulness-based intervention that helps us kind of stop and do meditation and really learn to pause and notice how our mind is thinking so that we have choice about where our awareness is taking us. And I loved it so much that I decided I had to be able to teach mindfulness.
How did that journey take you to becoming the official, one and only, top alpha weird girl?
So that's a great question. So the practice of mindfulness is a practice of noticing. It's like we become the driver. We get to steer, our car of our awareness. I don't want to think about this. Great. I have a choice. I'm going to come back and look at you, Scott. Something over there is distracting me like a squirrel. Great. I notice it. I know it's there. Hi, squirrel. I drive my awareness back to Scott and I'm right here right now. And that is the best. It helps us reduce our own suffering because we're not in regret, we're not in remorse, we're not in future, we're not in past, we're allowing what is present to be there until it's not. And everything is impermanent. And so I was doing mindfulness workshops and mindfulness speaking, but then the pandemic started and I got really quiet again. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't travel. I can't speak. Mm-hmm. I don't want to talk about mindfulness for stress reduction because my jam is self-awareness. So I was like, what am I going to do? And I just got quiet and I unplugged from social media. I think you remember I stopped doing a lot of the Zoom rooms because it was stressing me out. Yeah. I got really quiet and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to put all my weird stories together and write a book. And the book begot the brand, the Weird Girl brand. And weird is an invitation to allow our weird, the thoughts and the feelings that we believe separate us, that are actually our greatest connection to others and can even serve the purpose of serving others. That is what Weird Girl is all about.
As usual, you don't make it shallow. And I love that about you because that's not what we're about here on the Purpose Highway. We like to go deep. Let me ask you a question that begs. Do you believe there is such thing as normal?
I believe that we're all weird, different weirding, kind of same dog, different paws. And I like to call us a collective weirdness of humaning.
Why do you think weirdness scares us?
Well, I think it comes from that definition of it's either odd or it's fascinating. I mean, if you look at people like Lady Gaga, Sir Richard Branson, Lord Byron, Albert Einstein, what's scarier is when you don't align with who you are, when you're not in alignment with your own weird, your own uniqueness and who you are. And so allowing is that first step. It's not resisting, but it's not saying you have to love your weird. You have to rock your weird. You have to embrace your weird. And all the messages out there, I feel like are so one dimensional. I feel like we're shooting people back to themselves rather than inviting. And I think this space of allowing is an invitation where everything else is possible. And I don't want to pontificate. I want to say that, isn't it aren't we all kind of inviting people to our ideas and concepts? Like we're retail workers going, try this on. Oh, that looks really good. What do you think?
I have flashbacks when I was a teenager and I'd go to the store and they'd say, oh, you look fabulous, Scott. Then I'd walk into school wearing that outfit the next day and everyone would laugh at me. That was, though, me being weird, not in an authentic way, but wearing something because someone thought I wanted the approval of that person that I was giving money to, which goes to another question that I have for you. Do you think there is such thing as good weird and bad weird?
So when I talk about weird, it isn't about flying my freak flag and doing anything that would hurt myself or hurt anybody else or be, completely out of alignment with my own values. I think when we show up in a way that is out of alignment with our deepest values, and I think for most of us, those values are good values. So when we show up in a way that's in alignment, that isn't in a way that's there to hurt people, or it isn't in a way to be like, look how different I am, to put that mask on of the identity becomes, look how different. The identity isn't my weird, right?
It's almost like you're talking about the difference between, or weirdness sort of being a connection to the core of who our mind, body, spirit are versus an inauthentic projection of what we think that other people might feel as weird in order to fit into a social role that society may or may not have for people that are quote unquote weird.
Yeah. It is funny. Like I was just thinking about Lady Gaga and the way that she showed up to demonstrate how different she was at first.
Yes.
With the meat dresses and the amazing costumes, which I love. Mm-hmm. And she did that, I feel like, as part of her journey to say, this is who I am. But in doing so, she was using props to demonstrate who she was. And now look at the next iteration. She's just her. She's just her.
Do you think that weirdness is a destination or a journey?
I think it's neither. I don't think it's a destination or a journey. It's just who we authentically are.
Mm-hmm. Some might argue that we are living in an era of extraordinarily fraying social ties, and that community identities, traditional markers of what creates a viable community, a viable nation, a viable society, a viable culture are falling apart. And those that may feel concerned about that also might feel that this desire or this push that they might hear coming out of the mouth of people like yours actually serves to divide us. That what we need to be doing is to find ways to be more and more alike, to sort of build our cohesiveness as a community. Mm-hmm. What would you say to someone like that?
I would say that when we are in alignment with who we are, that is when we are the most connected. We're the most able to connect with others. When we're not in alignment with who we are, that fear barrier is just that. It's a barrier that disconnects us from others. So I think that allowing ourselves to be human beings, be who we are. I mean, think about it in any kind of group that hasn't been allowed to be who they are, whether it's homosexuality, whether it's skin color, once we start breaking open the barriers to allow people in as their individual selves or the groups that they're in, doesn't that end up uniting rather than dividing?
So many times in my life, speaking personally here, I have encountered people who say, I can't relate to them. They're not like me. I'm uncomfortable with what's different. I want to be around folks that are like me. I don't have the capacity to just take in things that are different. Or perhaps even my religion, my spirituality may not support things that I view as weird. How do any of us reach out to folks like that? Or do you think we should be reaching out to them?
I mean, there's a lot of what you were talking about is just people's thought processes and people's biases. And there are so many people that are trying to uncover where these biases come from. And, it reminds me of when I was a 10-minute Christian. I'm Jewish. We're not religious. I have an atheist dad, an agnostic mom. And in an effort to try to fit into some sort of community,
yes.
When I was a runner, I was in the running community. But after my back injury, I wanted to find community, a place where I would fit. And I literally tried on the laws of attraction. And I was like, that doesn't really fit for me. And then I tried on, I don't know. One of the things I tried on was religion and spirituality. And I went to a Christian church and thought, well, here's a nice group of people and I could fit in. And you know what? I didn't fit in because my range of emotion wasn't a fit for the constraints of the happy, shiny, what I called the happy, shiny people. My emotions and my roller coaster that I lived on was too big for that. And I didn't fit in at all. And it wasn't a fit for me. So I left.
What would you say to those who feel inside that they have put on a mask or wearing these horrible 1970s sweaters, but are afraid? They're afraid they're going to lose their job. They're afraid that they're going to be alienated from their family. They're afraid they won't be able to pull in a paycheck and feed their children. But they're desperate. What do you say to them?
That is such a brilliant question, Scott. And I do some individual coaching with people. And the question I ask is, what happens if you don't? What would more suffering look like for you? What would having to go down into even deeper suffering? What effect would that have on the people that love you? What effect would that have on you personally?
What would a world look like that fully embraces the weirdness in everyone?
What would it look like? That's a little bit of a utopian concept, but I think, I don't know what it would look like. I think in pictures, so I'm a creative, so I think in pictures,
I love it.
But I think that this time over the last year, that has been the desire, that's been a desire that people have really tapped into because they haven't had to go to places and fit into certain social constructs and workplaces. And I think that the younger people especially aren't going to put up with being in environments where they are stifled, where they are oppressed, where if there's too many choices available now, so people don't have to do that. Mm-hmm. But I get that there's people who do, and I get that there's people that have to have paychecks and to support their families and feed their children and stuff like that. And the invitation to them is, where else in your life can you notice that you don't have to wear that mask? Because it can be both and. You may have to have that job right now, but where in your life do you not have to wear that mask? And then expand your awareness so that you notice it's both, that it's not all one way.
Shelley, there are going to be people that have watched this video or listened to the audio version of this show and are going to want to work with you or at a minimum, learn more about you. Where can they find out more about you and how can they connect with you?
Thanks, Scott. So weirdgirladventures.com is my website. I'm very active on Instagram at Weird Girl Adventures. I'm on Facebook at Weird Girl Adventures. My book is called Weird Girl Adventures from A to Z. It's not a label. It's a lifestyle. And I'm also on LinkedIn, Shelley Brown.
Do you have anything else going on that you want to share with us?
So I am excited about the book, and pre-sales are probably opening up next week. Also, really, I've just finished writing my keynote. I've written a TEDx. I love speaking to groups, and I love making my sessions very, very interactive. I want to be inclusive. That is one of my values. And so if anybody out there is looking for somebody to bridge the gap between weird and work as a means to move the needle on the status quo of both personal and professional development, I'm your weird.
And I'd go to every one of those workshops. Shelley, it has been great taking a ride with you today. Thank you for joining us on the Purpose Highway. Anyone who has watched the show or listened to it, if you enjoyed Shelley, look her up, find out more about her. If you enjoyed the show itself, be sure to leave a review, subscribe. And for everyone tuning in, we will see you next time for another trip down the Purpose Highway. When you're racing down the Purpose Highway, we want to make sure you're healthy and happy every step of the way. That's why we're proud to partner with It's NOLA, 21st century plant-based healthy granola snack bites made with real ingredients and audacious flavor. It's NOLA crafts small batch hand-rolled granola balls that are vegan, gluten-free, and naturally low in sugar. Locally made in Brooklyn, It's NOLA's delightful bites come in 3 flavors: luscious cranberry coconut, sassy mango masala, and dark, decadent, chewy chocolate. It's NOLA is available to both individual customers and for wholesale accounts at itsnola.com. That's ITSNOLA.com. Guests on this show are already enjoying this delicious snack. Check out It's NOLA's website for yourself and find out how good it is. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Join our community today at purposehighway.com and subscribe to get notified when new episodes go live. Scott Mason, checking out.